RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Friday, May 3rd. We'll be taking a look at tomorrow's UFC 301 slate on DraftKings. 14 fights as of now. Hit that thumbs up button on your way in the door. Give me those thumbs. You know how much I like those in the morning. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. It's also Freebie Friday. And if you want to use our fantasy pick'em tool, if you're going to play on Prize Picks, if you're going to play on Underdog, if you're going to play DraftKings Pick 6, we got the stuff for you. You could use all of our projections, all of our content here. If you're a premium member, you could just download all of our data and use it to your heart's extent as much as you want. But we also do have a pick'em tool which you could show on the screen right now. If you use the link in the description, go to the special link for the free stuff today, Prize Picks Today. Make sure you go there from the homepage. And we've organized. I don't know, Steve, if you could throw it up on the screen. We've organized all the Prize Picks now. The old tool has these tables or whatever, but now we have it so that all of the sports are in one spot. So you could go on Prize Picks and just look at PGA, MLB, cricket even. I mean, we even have cricket stuff on Prize Picks. So you could go through, you could see compared to our current projections based on, you always look at the timestamp here and see where the biggest edges are across the sites, or you could just highlight just the sports that you want. So if you're going to be playing on Prize Picks, if you're going to play on Underdog today, DraftKings Pick 6, go check out the Prize Picks Pick'em tool today for free on Freebie Friday. But the guy that isn't free, the Takedowns article, the guy that writes that, he's not free. Well, maybe free today for during this show, as well as tomorrow for Crunch Time. It's John Breslin, a.k.a. SquirrelPatrol, UFC 301. I know we had some breaks and some action this past month coming from UFC 300, but they're in Brazil, and it seems like I think literally every fight is a Brazilian fighter against a non-Brazilian fighter. So are we just going to assume, John? I know that you like rolling with narratives. That when in doubt, if it goes to a decision, probably if by default, if you had I don't know who to pick in this fight, probably pick the Brazilian.
Yeah, every single fight is a Brazilian versus a non-Brazilian fighter. That does weigh into the odds heavily, which then obviously factors into the DraftKings pricing. So actually, I am not even sure how many of the Brazilians are even underdogs. I guess Elvis Premier is an underdog. There's not many of them that are underdogs. So you would actually have a very difficult time making an all Brazilian lineup just because the pricing won't work. But yeah, it is something that should be factored in. I guess Jose Aldo is technically a Brazilian underdog as well. So yeah, you could make an all Brazilian lineup, but you could probably only make a couple of them. So I actually don't think it's as much of a factor on this card as it is for some of the other cards. Some of the other cards, like France and I think Canada, we've seen pretty heavy underdogs that are local to the area end up winning, interesting decisions. The fighters were underpriced on DraftKings or were low priced on DraftKings because they were underdogs. We really just don't even have that many cheap Brazilian fighters on this card. So I don't think that's as much in play as it sometimes is.
Also, this card, even though it is a pay-per-view, is a little bit lacking. They're in Brazil. They're going to be booking a lot of Brazilian fighters. A lot of former Dana White Contender Series people on it. I mean, the main event is Pantoja versus Urseg. If you're an MMA fan, Pantoja is, I guess, a name, but maybe not as high profile, especially in that weight class that you would normally see on UFC pay-per-view. 14 fight card, maybe 13. Everyone made weight. Now, technically, everyone made weight, but William Gomis like really made weight. Like
Yeah.
I've never seen someone, I don't think so, that come in 3 pounds under with clothes on and also getting helped off the scale. I wouldn't be shocked if we find out later today that that fight is going to be called off due to
Yeah.
health reasons. But for now, we'll act as if that fight exists. But I don't mind 13 fights, still isn't that bad. I'd rather they start with 14 or 15 and lose one or two than we get down to these 10 or 11 fight cards.
Yeah, I agree. The William Gomi thing is there's got to be a backstory that's going to come out. I think he was even more than 3 pounds. I think he was like 4 pounds underweight with clothes on, and like he had to be helped off the scale. And I've seen fighters have to be like helped off the scale before. Jessica I 3 or 4 years ago comes to mind. But like he really needed help. Like I watched the weigh-in, and as they got him like kind of off screen and into the hallway, like he really needed help. Like they were like two people supporting him, supporting his weight entirely, dragging him like down, kind of out into the hallway. I agree. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know what the backstory there would be, like why he would be so much underweight, and why, and then in such bad condition. So it would absolutely not be a shock if that fight is canceled. It brings up an interesting like question. What if the fight's not canceled going into the lock? I'm still not sure I'm comfortable playing the fight. Like I would say, like, it's interesting because Gomi had really good win equity for his price. He was like a 48% underdog. I think it's just 7,600. I'm already talking about him in the past tense. He is a $7,600 underdog with a 48 and had a 48% chance of winning the fight. The line's going to move to John Silva's direction. I'm not sure if I would still be comfortable playing Silva if the fight's like still technically on going into lock, because like I don't know. It's just a question for the Brazilian Fight Commission, I think. But it would not be a shock that the fight is called off.
And I wouldn't be shocked that the Brazilian Fight Commission doesn't give a crap.
Okay.
If
it doesn't give,
right,
yeah,
I mean, it's the Brazilian Fight Commission. I mean,
yeah.
We're talking fight commissions in general don't have the best the press as far as being, on the up and up to begin with, let alone the Brazilian Fight Commission. It's a sad thing because as we talked about the slate, I would rather have that fight on the card.
Yeah.
For reasons that I want other people to play it. And that this is now going to lower the ownership of that fight. And that's the fight that I wanted more people to play.
Yeah. So, I think John Silva can be a high scoring fighter. William Gomi tends to not be, and he tends to like suppress scoring in his opponent too. He's like a stand on the outside guy. So we'll see what's happening with that fight. I think there's a good chance it's canceled. And if it's not, I will probably, I think there's maybe an argument to be staying away from the fight for multiple reasons, even if the fight is still on.
So let's look at the contextual variables of the slate, which I always like doing from a strategic perspective, thinking in terms of what the optimal lineup is more or less likely to look like, right? Because me and John, we tend to play a little bit more large field GPPs. The smaller field stuff, you don't need the optimal lineup, right? Even in the large field, sometimes you don't need the optimal, but you're most likely to need something very close to it. So understand that difference between the contests that you play. That on a large field contest, like getting 80 points from an underdog that wins isn't as valuable as if you're playing the 555 with 300 and 400 entries, where the 57th optimal lineup could be the winning lineup as opposed to the large field contest. So assuming that we have 14 fights on the card, right? The two contextual variables I look at the most as far as what type of lineup construction am I aiming towards is how many fights are there on the card and the spreads between those fights. Now, the larger the card, that means the more opportunities that there are for fighters to put up 100 plus points, whether it be favorite or underdog. So with 28 fighters on the card, to me, that prioritizes ceiling, right? 11 fight card, getting six winners even if the winning score is 87 or something, that could be optimal. On a 14 fight card, less likely. So I tend to prioritize ceiling rather than win equity. And then also the spreads of these fights. I mean, if we look at minus 600, minus 645, minus 550, minus 550, minus 400. I mean, even in the high 8K range, I mean, dude, we have a fighter at 8,400 that's minus 200 to win. Those cheap underdogs have less and less win equity on this type of card as opposed to a 14 fight card where, yeah, maybe you have you got Bo Nickel or something up there. You get, Jelton Almeida, and then you get a bunch of 2-to-1s and 2.5-to-1s. All these 9K fighters are essentially, 70, 80, 85% chances to win. And the contextual variable behind that is that the optimal lineup is more and more likely to use more and more of the salary, right? I'm not saying that 3 9K fighters are going to be able to, that's going to be the lineup, but in general, the bigger the spreads of the fights, that means it's just less likely that more underdogs win. I mean, it's just as simple as that. So I view this slate. I think people may go in looking at, okay, which 9K fighter is going to put up the highest score? I think the more the question is, what's the lowest price fighter that's actually going to win a fight? And it's quite possible that the 9K fighters, I don't want to say cancel each other out, but they may all score decently well enough that, one guy scores 118, one guy scores 106, one guy scores 112. Like that may not be the big choice. The choice is which sub 7,500 or less fighter are you playing in your lineup in order to fit one or two of these 9K guys in? And it's slim pickings here. So with that being the dynamic, John, let's start with the highlight of there's 1 5-round fight. It's the main event. 8,800 Pantoja, 7,400 Urseg. We don't have the optimal rates, which will be coming out later today, obviously with the Ground and Pound podcast as well for premium members. At these prices, I don't know about you. I'm going to assume that someone like Steve Urseg at 7,400 is going to have a fairly high optimal rate just because you take a look at underneath him, and I'm not sure that anyone else wins underneath that price range.
Yeah, it's a really interesting card for math because these lower price fighters have a much lower chance of winning their fights than we normally see with lower price fighters. It does actually drop down pretty far. Potiera at 6,600 is really cheap. I mean, that's we all often see the cheapest fighter on a card to be 6,900, 6,800, get a couple hundred extra as we should, because he's only got about an 18% chance of winning the fight, I think. But I think it's really interesting to compare these implied win odds to our projected ownership, because I do think with 14 fights on the card, we're going to see some minuscule ownership on some of these fighters, but one of them is probably going to win. And then that becomes the entire key to breaking the slate. I think I'm going to be well over the field on Potiera. I think Potiera is one of the first fighters I tagged because we've got him at 5% projected ownership. I think he'll come in higher than 5, probably less than 10. But if he's got an 18% chance of winning his fight at 6,600, he might be the only fighter, if he wins, that does win in that super underdog price range. It's picking that right underdog that wins is going to be the key to the slate. I think ownership is going to gravitate. You look at these lines, right? And whenever you see minus 600, minus 500, minus 700 or whatever, it's that's an automatic points. I got to play that fighter. And I don't know that when you assume every single one of these fighters wins their fight and line up the scores, I don't know that the fighters in the 9K range are actually going to score all that well. And they've got some big names, and they are the Brazilian fighters, right? They're the Brazilian fighters. If you're going with that narrative, you're trying to jam in as many of these 9K fighters as you can. I think the fighters in the mid range are more likely to put up high scores in their wins. And so that's probably how I'm going to approach the card. I think the exception is maybe Michel Pereira, who's got a 40-something% chance of getting the first round win, but he's the priciest fighter at 9,600. So I'm gonna have a ton of this like Pereira fight, and then I don't know. I don't know how much of the other like fights in the 9K range and like 6'8", 6'7" that I'm gonna have. And I think I'm going to be heavy on the mid range, but now we might be losing a fight in the mid range as well. But it was probably the fights I'm most likely to give up, would be least likely to play in the mid range. Except, yeah, I don't know. I think Jonathan Martinez and Jose Aldo might not be that high scoring of a fight as either. But yeah, all the other fights are probably the fights that I want to own.
But how about the main event being that, I'm assuming that we have it that almost 80% of the ownership is going towards Pantoja or Urseg. Even if you take shots on the really big underdogs, so you're not playing Steve Urseg, are you playing Pantoja in those lineups? Because in 5 rounds, at 8,800, number one, Pantoja could win early also and put up 100 plus points, but 5 rounds to work with. In a decision, he's probably beating out the guys that are above him. Truthfully, with the styles of fights that are above him, are you looking more to eat into that? I think Pantoja is going to come in at 40%. We have him at 37 currently. I'm not sure if Urseg comes in at I think Urseg ends up coming in the mid 30s. If you're playing someone like Ior Patoria, you could eat any ownership. You could eat Pantoja, no problem. But are you, because of ownership assuming this is 14 fights, that's just more fighters that could potentially outscore the main event. My personal heuristic is I tend to be under in these situations, but I'm not. If I'm under on this, I'm gonna end up leaning towards those barbell lineups where I have to take a shot on 42-year-old Vince Pichel or something, or Paul Craig to just spring something out of nowhere. That doesn't make me feel comfortable. But if you're building lineups to win large field GPPs and you feel comfortable about it, you're probably doing it the wrong way.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great way to put it. I think I am very confident that the winning lineup here is in this, on this DK event is going to be something that you look at, and if you looked at it beforehand, it would make you extremely uncomfortable. Because there's just not a lot of value to work with. I it's not a main event that I'm looking to fade. I don't know. I won't own 100% of the main event, but it's not one that I'm going in thinking that's the edge on the card. Is oh, people are going to go way over the field on the main event, and I'm going to go under. I won't have 100% in my 150 set, but it's a pretty good main event because Pantoja scored over 140 his 2 5-round wins. This one is favored to go over 3.5 rounds. I think it's favored to end inside the distance, but go over 3.5 rounds. So you're getting potentially something extra from the main event. Urseg's pretty good price for his win odds. Yeah, I think you've got, if I'm reading the columns right, about a 39% chance at 7,400. That's really good. And it's interesting the lines moved in his direction with the fight being Brazil. Pantoja is the Brazilian here. So yeah, it's not a main event I'm looking to fade, but I won't own 100%, but it's just priced in the mid range. Pantoja's high volume at 8,900 or at 8,800. Urseg's got a good shot to win, got good win odds at 7,400, and if he wins, 7,400, that's probably the key to the slate. So yeah, I think you've got to have a good chunk of the main event.
So looking at the 9K options, that are 4-1 or better favorites. So we got Pereira at 9,600, Caio Bahaio at 9,500, Vitor Petrino at 9,400, Ismail Bonfim at 9,300, and Yasmin Lucindo at 9,200. We have the ownership. I think we're gonna get more on Pereira and Petrino. I think Petrino may end up being higher owned than Pereira by maybe a little bit. I think Caio Bahaio will be just under that, and same for Bonfim. And then Lucindo will probably be the lowest owned of the bunch, even though she's the cheapest, facing Carolina Kovalevich. Because obviously people tend to stray away from the high-priced the female favorites. My attitude, I mean, the ownership's going to be there. I mean, Petrino, I mean, as a grappler, he's much more likely to, in over 3 rounds in a decision, especially when you're an 85% favorite, you're much more likely to 30-27 someone, right? You're much more likely to just destroy someone. I consider Petrino to have the highest upside against Anthony Smith, but it's not like Anthony Smith is a no one, right? So, and same, I mean, we'd look at like Paul Craig. I think Kyle, see, the thing is that like Caio Bahaio is probably the smartest guy up here. The problem is that like he'll win decisively in a 3-round decision and score like 89 points because he just like he actually has fight IQ and tries to win fights no matter if it's not a finish or not, and stay out of danger. Pereira, on the other hand, is the complete opposite of that. Pereira is almost guaranteed. And I that's why I like Ior Peteria is awful. Okay. Ior Peteria, he's got a punching chance. Like he needs to find a shot someplace, but he's got about 5 minutes to do it before his cardio runs out. And Michel Pereira may give him the opportunity for that by doing some type of backflip or he'll do something. He's a showboat. But the most likely scenario is Michel Pereira just knocks the hell out of Peteria or ground and pound or something. Bonfim, I think, is more likely. Like, he's not going to wrestle, really. I mean, essentially, he's going to be way faster than Vince Michel. And Michel's the one that would much rather have it on the ground. So if Bonfim doesn't knock him out in the first round, he probably fails. And then we got Lucindo against Kovalevich. And Caroline Kovalevich is, she's not going to finish anyone, but I don't know if Lucindo is going to be, that dominant. If you're going to play any of these 9K fighters, compared to ownership, I mean, which ones would you prefer? Is it just the straightforward thing of Petrino has much more likelihood of fighting in a way where he could score 135 points?
I think my favorite here is Lucindo because she's the cheapest. Because I think we're going to need the money on this card. And I agree. I was looking through the 9K fighters this morning, and these opponents in the 6,900, 6,800 range, like Michelle, Anthony Smith, Paul Craig, they tend not to give up super high scoring wins in their losses. And they're all underdogs for a reason. I think there's a good chance that all of the fighters in the 9K range win their fights. But I don't know that at the end of the night, when you line up all the winners, how high those scores are going to be. Baraja, I agree, is like Paul Craig in particular tends to suppress scoring. This and all of these fights might be some form of they're just rolling around for 15 minutes. And which I guess if you're getting if you're getting reversals and sweeps and stuff like that, those count on the DraftKings scoring. But it might not, right? Like it might be more control time, not a ton of strikes, submission attempts. Okay, he's attempts that submission for 45 seconds. It didn't work. He got out of it. He's trying another submission for 45 seconds. That one didn't work, but he got control time and won the round. I don't know. I think these fights are all going to be heavier owned, maybe than they should be. I think Petrino. I'm getting all these fights conflated because they all strike me as almost the exact same fight. Petrino, Bonfim, Baraja. I think it's gonna all be some form of grappling. I guess the Bonfim fight is not likely to be grappling, but could be lower scoring. I think Vince Michel in particular tends to again be somebody that's not going to engage as much in a high scoring war. I think the big exception in this range is the Michel Pereira and Potiera fight at the absolute tail end of the pricing range. I think they're going to go to war. And I think Potiera, there's like some bad blood for Potiera in Brazil, because I think last was it January. Um, Shogun was his retirement fight, and Potiera was expected to win. I think he was the favorite. They like did some kind of dance after finishing him. Brazilian crowd hated it because Shogun's like a big name there. So everybody's going to be like booing at Potiera, and I think they've set him up to lose spectacularly here. And I think Pereira, is going to do some kind of backflip thing, and maybe try to make a statement. So I think that'll be a high scoring fight. And I think the rest of them in this range might not be. Lucindo, I think, has some volume and is the cheapest. So she would actually be the fighter. And I think it's probably going to come in as lowest owned. So she's the fighter that I would be most, leaning towards being over the field on her.
So then what are you looking at in the mid range? I mean, the thing that the two that stand out to me, I mean, just obviously just for betting odds would be Joe Anderson Brito, 8,500. He's only minus 164 to win, but he's minus 105 inside the distance against Jack Shore. And then you have Mauricio Rufy, who's minus 205 to win and minus 140 inside the distance at only 8,400 against Jamie Malarkey. Are these the two kind of like, but they're obvious, but they're also going to be owned. I mean, I'm expecting, Rufy to be close to 40% owned, Brito to probably be around 30% owned. And also on the other side with, Jack Shore, people like playing Jack Shore for his, high-paced wrestling style. And then Jamie Malarkey, he's a name, but, he's not probably the line looks like this because he's not very durable, but he's not necessarily an awful. He's facing a newcomer, essentially, making his debut. Should the line be as wide as it is? Because outside of that, some of these other fights in the mid range, I hope people want to play the Martinez Aldo fight because that's almost a fight I feel like you could just cross it off. I'm not sure how much ceiling that has. How many leg kicks could each side have to score you that many points? And I can almost say the same about the Costa Borjas fight. Like Borjas is essentially just like a kickboxer. All right, Costa doesn't really have volume, and he doesn't really even wrestle that often. And that fight could just be a 3-round sparring contest. You say you want to attack this mid-range. Is it just making lineups with Brito and Rufy and these guys, and then Pantoja, and then like not even playing a fighter that you may not even need to play someone like that's a big underdog?
Yeah, so Rufy's an interesting case because he's 8,400. I think he's got the second best first round finish inside the distance odds. So he's going to be popular, but unlike the 9,000 fighters and plus fighters that are popular, I'll probably eat the ownership with Rufy. I think you've got to roster a good amount of him. The big concern is he's not super high volume. So he's got good, he's almost got the same statistical profile as one of the big heavyweights, right? He's got a good shot of finishing the fight early, but if he doesn't, he might not score that well. The thing is, on this card, 8,400, he might not need to score that well. So let's say he gets let's say he doesn't get the early finish, but he gets an 85, 86 point win. That still might be enough. So I think the ownership is justified in this case. I agree. It might go up to 40%. Because people are going to see the win odds. I think I was saying, I think I've even got him tagged already, that his win odds are better than the 4 fighters priced above him. Everybody up until to Barbosa. So I think that ownership is justified. Yeah, I think Joe Anderson Brito. I think that fight is going to be a fight I'm interested in targeting. The Drakkar Klose fight. Even Barbosa, Orlabi and Bernier. I think that'll be an action fight. So I think those are fights that you maybe want to pick a side and go to. But I think more people are going to be drawn to the outsized win odds of the 9K fighters. Jamie Malarkey is going to be an interesting pivot, and I think Jack Shore will be as well in terms of the underdogs. Malarkey, I don't think he's got a great shot of winning the fight against Rufi. And Rufi is the Brazilian fighter. But yeah, I think Rufi's going to have so much ownership that if Malarkey does win, and it's not impossible, then then he's the key to the slates. And you can kind of say the same thing for Jack Shore or Joaquim Silva. Like any of these fighters that win in this range, you're probably going to be the fighter you need to roster to win the DFS tournament.
One fight that really haven't talked about because it's like in that weird range because he's a 9K fighter, but he's not as big of a favorite as the other ones. Is Mike Debicq Oralby, and he's facing Elvis Brenner. Brenner is plus 300 inside the distance, and also like Elvis Brenner fights are never bad.
Yeah.
Like this is a dude that if you have him in your lineup and you watch the fight, he's going to be live until the very, very end because like this dude could just take like 800 punches and not die. He's also the biggest Brazilian underdog on the slate. But the problem with the thing is that I take a look at fights like Mike Brown, H3 Buddha talks about this a lot on Crunch Time, is that these fighters that could win when facing a wrestler, if they could get stifled enough in one round that it completely suppresses their scoring. So like Joe Anderson Brito is explosive and he actually has some ground game, but if Jack Shore ends up, on top of him in the first round, Brito could win with the second round knockout and just still not score enough because he scored 2 points in the first round. So I take a look at someone like Elvis Brenner, and he's 7,200, so I'm not as concerned about one of them he only scores 87 points. Like that made it at that price. Yeah. If he's the only one down there that wins, you're probably going to need him. Oralby is much more likely to control Brenner on the ground. So it's like these types of fights, I don't like leaning into ownership, but I don't think Brenner is really going to be super owned. I'm not sure. Outside of Urseg, I'm really not sure. Maybe Joaquim Silva down there because I'm people are going to play underdogs. I think they're going to play Urseg, main event underdog, or they're going to play a Brazilian. They're going to go, I'm going to play Joaquim Silva, I'm going to play Elvis Brenner, right? Or people will just say, I'm going to plug in Carolina Kalvakevich because maybe she could win. Maybe this fight goes the distance and she probably doesn't get a good score in a win, but she's there. Like in your takedowns article, you talk about underdogs. I mean, you seem way more confident in that someone down here is winning, and I'm not.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if you just start to add up the win odds, you get over 100 at some point down here, right? If you just sort them by salary and just in the spreadsheet, right? You just add up the win odds. You get to 100 and say, okay, well, one of these is probably going to win. I think it's probably just going to be one. So otherwise, card just becomes chaos anyway. Yeah, I think the Oralby Brenner fight is one that I'm going to target. I like the idea that Brenner could potentially he's like an energizer bunny or whatever. He'll just keep going. I think he's been massive underdogs in his 3 wins. And so and it is at multiple points in the fight, watching his fights, it's okay, he's done. The massive favorite's going to win here, and Brenner doesn't die at the end, just keeps coming back and comes back and gets the win. I think that could potentially lead to a lot of high scoring against Mika Tic Oralby because Oralby is one of these repeat takedown guys. So if Brenner keeps having the energy to get up and can get up, that could be a high score for Oralby. So that's definitely a fighter that I want to target at 9K. And at 9K, you're starting to get some savings where he doesn't necessarily need to have the highest score on the card to get in the winning lineup. let's see. Yeah, Kalkevich I think she's got 4 fights in a row or 4 wins in a row. But and she doesn't tend to be that high scoring. But again, yeah, 7,000. She probably doesn't need to be. So yeah, I think she's a fighter. You want to probably roster her close to her win odds. Yeah, I think she's a decent underdog. Even if you're just picking one, all of this does lead to like Urseg getting really outsized ownership. Like I think he's going to be by far the highest owned underdog, just being in the main event. Um, he'll probably be the underdog that I have the highest ownership amount of. But I probably won't aim to go like way over that ownership because he's gonna get a pretty good chunk of ownership here.
I think when I'm going to make a prediction that when our sim output comes out later today or tomorrow morning, I'm going to predict that Urseg is the highest in the model.
Yeah.
Because if you really take a look at it, like a lot of times you'll see like the 9K fighters like high in the model, but typically it's 1 or 2. I'm not sure with all of them being, like 6-1, 5-1, all these guys with, 40, 50, 60% inside the distance. Like I could easily see like I could see like as you go cheaper, right? You see someone like Vitor Petrino be like 31% chance of being optimal, right? And then you see like Pereira or like Lucindo, like 26%. And then Bahayo is like 25%. And then Pereira is like 23%. Like, and almost like they all vote because they all vulture each other because most likely a too high 9K lineup, like a Pereira Bahayo lineup, is going to be much less likely to be optimal because in order to play the 2 most expensive guys, you're going to have to pick like 2 cheap guys that are probably not going to win. So those lineups are going to have much less optimal rates. So it's going to end up being where the types of lineups that our sim tool prefers are ones where you're only playing 1 9K fighter. And there's not that much difference enough between the 9K fighters that, well, no, definitely Petrino. Petrino, 48% chances of being optimal, and Bump Theme is 12, or, like one of those types of slates. I think they're just going to vulture all of them. And then when you take a look at the bottom, like these really low priced, I think it ends up being the very similar to what you said, that all of these cheap guys are going to be optimal way more than you think, just due to the fact that one of them, but none of them is it's not going to be Pateria that is like 18% chance. It's like all these guys are going to be like 14 to 16% chances of like being optimal. Kalvakevich may be like 12%. Brenner may be 16%, but no one's going to really like separate between them. And then the ones that like come in like the highest, compared to their salary would be guys like Brito and Rufy. Like you'll say, I'm suspecting that if I had to guess, I would put Urseg 1, Pantoja 2, Rufy 3, Brito 4, and then we start getting to the 9K guys all kind of in a bunch. And then at the bottom, like I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be like a bottom where like some of these guys are like 6-7%. I don't think anyone is possibly that low.
Yeah, I think the optimal rates in like the Sims tend to be really price sensitive. So I'm surprised at how often like the most expensive fighter has like a very low optimal rate. But there's a counterbalance for this particular card because I think the Sims tend to really like first round finish, like in early finish odds. And so Pereira's got, he is really expensive, but he also has by far the best like first round finish odds on the fight on the card. So I think that'll like balance. I think the guys under him are, going to be really low optimal rates. I wouldn't be surprised if they have like lower optimal rates than some of their opponents. And I think, yeah, I think we're going to see that the like by far the most leverage is on the super cheap fighters because like if any because they're going to show up as really low owned, like 10 8% owned, 12% owned, but they're going to have 20% chance, 25% chance of winning their fight, and if they win their fight, they're have an outstanding chance of landing on the winning or optimal lineup. And I think that the fighters that the Sims are going to love are going to be Urseg and Rufy, because especially Rufy at that. Well, but yeah, both of them. Like with their win odds for the price, and their chances in their in the 5-round fight for Urseg and the early finish odds for Rufy, like they're going to be like, yeah, these guys are going to be optimal and outstanding percentage of the time.
So how would you rank the fighters underneath Urseg, right, from 7,300 down? I mean, I know you're going to have the takedowns article out for premium members, but I get the sense that, I mean, you have Pateria 1, or do you have Brenner 1? I mean, if you had a choice between rostering, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What would be your, as of right now, what would be your rankings on who would you roster if you had to choose only one of them?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting question, because I think it's a question that needs more nuance on this particular card, because the way that I approach like large field contests might be very different from the way I approach like the smaller, like 555 or like a single entry contest. I think for the super large field contest, right, like the $15, I don't know, it might be $20 on this week.
It's $25 this week.
$25 this week, yeah, for the pay-per-view. I would go with like Potiera first. And by Potiera first, that doesn't mean he's the one I'm going to have the most of, but he's the one at current projected ownership that would be like most over the field on, right? If he's projected at 5% ownership, like I might have him at 15. That would be 3 times the field, right? It would almost go in reverse order. Like I would go like Potiera, then Paul Craig, maybe go the female fighters and Brenier, and Elvis Brenner, Karakate, and I think I'm butchering the name. Ernesta Karakate. She's interesting. She had, I think, 180 significant strikes in her Contender Series win. That should be an interesting fight. That's a fight I want to target. Her and Barbosa, because that's tremendous volume. But that might have been a little bit of a one-off for that like one Contender Series fight. And also Barbosa is a grappler. So how many significant strikes can Karakate land if she's on our back? But then the fight's also projected to go the distance. So if Barbosa is getting like 3 rounds of control time, and she's not as expensive as the 9K fighters, then she's suddenly an interesting fighter. Like I don't necessarily love 3 rounds of control time at a $9,600 price tag. At $8,900, it starts to become something okay, that might be a good scoring win at that price range, at that price tag on this card. So yeah, if I had to rank the fighters, like I think Potiera, I don't know if I want to do like a 1 through 7 ranking, but I'd like just say like I think Potiera is the one for the super large field contest that I want to have at like 15%, right? If he wins this fight, 15-20% of my lineups, which is going to be way over the field. Because if he wins this fight, he has a really good shot of landing on the winning lineup. For the smaller field, maybe for the 555 single entry, maybe the Karakade, Elvis Brenner, Kowalkiewicz are fighters that I'm interested in, because those are fighters that I could see them putting up like a 40-point loss, and then maybe or getting the win, right? And then suddenly that's something I'm much more interested in for the smaller field contests. Whereas like Potiera is somebody that's more likely to put up either a 0 or 90-point win.
Well, you'll be covering more of your thoughts on strategy on tomorrow's Crunch Time show with Mike H3 Buddha Brown. Also, we got the Grounded Pound podcast that should be coming out today as well, with Liam breaking down all the fights. We also have his fight breakdowns. We got the expert survey. We got obviously lineup HQ. We got our player projections. We got our ownership projections. We got everything you need for MMA DFS on DraftKings. The slate starts at 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. So click on that link in the description. Join us here at RotoGrinders. Get a combo premium package. You get everything. MLB and NBA, even during the playoffs, NHL, you get everything. And join us in the Discord, which is most of the channels are free. So rotogrinders.com/Discord. Remember, it's Freebie Friday. Check out that the fantasy pick'em tool. If you're on Prize Picks and Underdog, check out our projections. Use them. Build your cards, build your slips, more or less it. Play the demons, play the goblins, play whatever boost and score. Play the scorchers. I don't know what there's so many names for oh well, it's over this and then it's under that and it's whatever. But John, you'll have your takedowns article for premium members. I'm assuming sometime today.
Yep. Hopefully it should be sometime today. Yeah, we'll see. I've got already starting with the tags and the write ups. So good chance of it coming out today. Yeah, and then crunch time tomorrow.
Okie doke. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. We got Grinders live and Crunch Time later today, 5 o'clock Eastern for MLB. We got a big Friday MLB slate. Kevin Roth will be on in Crunch Time for all the weather updates. Obviously, stay tuned over the weekend for MMA stuff. Obviously, we got Crunch Times over the weekend for baseball. And then I'll be back on Monday because I'm here all the time for you. Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern. Talking about all things you're thinking about in daily fantasy, props, and pick'em on RotoGrinders Today.